Hi, my name is Reen. Sounds like green. I'm a Minnesota licensed realtor helping families get through probate with more money and less stress. Today, I'm joined by attorney Gregory Singleton from Signature Law in Minnesota, covering primarily the Twin Cities area. Gregory, welcome to the Probate Help Desk podcast. Please tell us a little bit about your services and what drew you into estate planning and probate work.
Thanks, Rena, and thanks for having me. Well, like you said, my name's Gregory Singleton. I own Signature Law. I primarily do estate planning and probate, a little bit of guardianship here and there. The my practice area is, I would say, primarily estate planning and probate, and some trust administration as well. I got into it. I started off. I'm a reformed litigator. I started off as a commercial litigator, wearing the three-piece suit and arguing in front of juries and judges and all that jazz. And I just kind of realized I don't like to argue with people, which is something you should figure out before you go to law school, but that's neither here nor there. Um, in any event, when I was looking for what I wanted to do as I was moving my way out of litigation, I recalled one of the reasons when I went to law school in the first place was for handling people's estates. We had some issues in my family where an estate was not handled properly, and it really drove a rift in the family. And there's some people I'll unfortunately probably never speak to again, even though I wasn't even involved in anything. People just end up taking sides. And when I went to law school, I was like, maybe I can keep people from doing this. In law school, I went in a different direction, but coming back to that, being able to be on the end of properly setting up estate plans to avoid those problems, and then usher people through the process of doing probate and trust administration after someone passes. Really love it. I absolutely love it. So that brings me here today.
Well, that is fantastic, and I think it's really interesting that you mentioned the litigation and arguing with people, and you find yourself doing estate planning, which would hopefully help avoid that for a lot of families. In probate, do you run into families that are dealing with contentious issues and it requires hopefully there's no litigation there, but do you deal with threats of litigation from time to time or help families avoid that?
Yeah. Often it comes into one of three camps. I'm going to say one, everyone's on the same page.
Mm.
Two, everyone is totally at odds. And three, people just don't quite trust each other. I don't tend to, at this point, or at least I don't have capacity right now to deal with people that are fully at odds with each other and fighting. Full-on litigation is a very different beast than what I do. But it's that, and if everyone's in agreement, that things run smoothly and great and done. And that usually happens when there's an estate plan in place,
Mm.
and B, the decedent, the person who died, spoke with all their kids and heirs and family about that estate plan before they died. It makes a huge, huge difference for them to do that. That middle ground where people just aren't trusting each other, that's where you got to be a little bit careful.
Mm.
Um, Litigation is a very blunt instrument. It is a club that tries to hit you over the head in one blow. It never does. So and I take the tact of I don't ever threaten to sue someone unless I plan on suing them. This is not Suits. Suits is a too many people watched Suits, and I've been approached by clients that have said, "Hey, can you be the next Harvey Specter and be the bulldog and get in there?" And let's not even get into the ethical problems that happen in Suits and how nothing relates to anything. That's just
Yeah.
not how the law works. So navigating those family dynamics when people just don't trust each other, that's really where the art comes in.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, do you sometimes encourage families to go through mediation, or are you also a mediator? How do you approach mediation when it comes to contentious probate cases?
Yeah, I have not had to mediate a case in probate yet. I've always been able to get the parties to come together, and usually it's a matter of just getting the communication lines of communications open, and then getting past the emotional part, just to say, here's the numbers, here's what it says, here's what we're going to end up with. And if you can get it down to just the base numbers, sometimes you can get beyond that emotion. Because essentially that's what you're doing in mediation, right? You're trying to get beyond the personal, beyond the emotion, just down to the flat numbers of what is a number people can walk away with and be satisfied. Never happy, but just satisfied.
Yep.
So I can often do that by representing when I'm just representing the personal representative. I can't mediate at the same time because I'm already representing one of the parties, but yeah.
That is fantastic. And I think that skill set is that's just amazing that part of what you bring to the work you do with the families and the clients that you work with is to help them get through probate without litigation. That it, families where it goes well, I don't know if they always appreciate what a value that is, right? Because once you get into that
Yeah.
litigation or someone's really frustrated or irritated, it can be a disaster.
It takes up enough real estate in your head that you can't think about anything else. Let me give you a quick story about this. Wasn't my story. This is a colleague of mine, Brian. He had worked through a probate, and the only thing left, and the family was fighting, fighting, fighting the whole time. It
Mhm.
was like a brother and sister or something, and they fought and fought and fought. And they couldn't agree on anything. I got them all to agree on everything except a rug, which
Hmm.
apparently had great sentimental value. He did some research, and the rug was from IKEA, and it was worth about $50. And he called them into his office and he said, "Sit down. And my clock starts now. I bill at $300 an hour or whatever he billed at. And we're not leaving here until we decide who gets this rug, which is worth $50." And let me tell you, they got that thing settled in less than 5 minutes. So,
Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing. And Gregory, I believe that part of your philosophy is making law accessible to families. How do you go about accomplishing that?
yeah, many attorneys uh, bank on the fact that the law is written by attorneys for attorneys, and it is very hard to understand at times. And they see that their value is being the one that will do all the interpretation for the client, and they'll just give the client just what they know. I don't like that approach. I think a very old school approach. For example, when you're writing a will, there's the whereas, herefore, the yada yada yada, all the big fancy language you can have with 20-line run-on sentences that no one can understand except another attorney. That doesn't do anyone any good.
Hmm.
So, starting from the will side, if you can rewrite it in a way that is readable to people, it makes the law accessible to them. And I take that approach through probate as well. I have a YouTube channel of my own. I've perused through yours. It's fantastic. I don't do as much probate in my YouTube channel. Probably should do some more. Um, but it's about just explaining the basics. Here's what you need to know. Here's some of the issues that you can look at. Here's some of the strategies you can review and before you talk to an attorney.
Yeah.
I try to be open with my clients about what's going on, as opposed to being super mysterious and standoffish.
And I've also watched some of the videos on your YouTube channel, and I really appreciate the educational approach that you take. If people would just spend a little bit of time getting that education before they talk to their attorney, it can save them time and money, but it can help the attorney help them as well. And so I love that you put that content out there.
Well, if people can know what's important before they talk to their attorney, because a lot of people don't. Anytime, here's a free legal advice. If you're working with an attorney and they represent you, tell them everything.
Hmm.
Don't hold back. Because you don't know what the important information is. So I think by educating people a little bit more from the outset, they can say, "Oh, this is important. This one thing I wasn't going to tell my attorney." It can save a lot of money in the long run. I literally have been in trial, getting ready for the jury to walk in for the voir dire, and had a client turn to me and say, "Hey, by the way, yada yada yada. I didn't tell you this because I didn't want you to bill me for it. It
Mm.
would have taken a 6 minute billing increment for him to tell me, but it was literally the smoking gun on the case, and we got up and settled the case on a handshake there,
Oh, wow.
while waiting for the jury to walk in. And he could have saved probably $100,000 of trial prep, because had
Wow.
we known it, we would have settled a long time ago.
That is amazing. And you talked a little bit about your own personal probate experience. What would you say inspired you to create a client-focused model for your practice?
I didn't go right to law school out of undergrad. I went and worked for 10 years. I actually worked as an actor, doing Shakespeare and stuff. And I had a bunch of other customer service jobs, because you got to support yourself. Um, I think most people, when they go to law school, they come right out of undergrad, they go to law school, and during that essential time where you're supposed to be learning to interact with people as a human being, they learn to interact with people as an attorney,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. It's a very important skill to be able to do, but if you don't have that ability to interact with people as a person, then you're missing something, and you're going to miss something that you need in that attorney realm. So, with that background, I really decided I didn't want to work with other attorneys that are automatons and just know the
Yeah.
law and good technicians and everything. I wanted people that really focused on the individual.
That is so important, and that's similar to what I do in my real estate practice as well.
Mhm.
It's not just about the transactional of it, it's how people feel during the process and after the process, and
Yeah,
especially when we're dealing with a probate case and maybe a first-time home buyer, right? One family is emotionally charged because they just lost a loved one, and the other family is emotionally charged because they're moving into their first-time home, and they can start arguing over the plants or a spot on the wall or so
yeah,
many different things.
yeah. That's that. I mean, that's the crux of it, right? Because it's two things. One, there's a large amount of money and assets at issue. Usually, it's somebody's entire life estate, or the entire estate that they built up over their life. And then two, emotions. And what people do is they tie their emotions to what they receive from that individual. So
Yeah,
if there's an unequal distribution, they'll be like, well, my sister Susan got 60% of the estate and I only got 40% of the estate. Did
yeah.
my mom love me less? It sounds kind of crazy, but that's how people think in the back of their mind. And that's when they say, I want to sue. I want to
Right.
get my 50%. And yeah.
Wow. And earlier you talked about estate planning as a way to avoid some of this contentious probate cases, scenarios. Um, in some situations, there seems to be some confusion around estate planning. Why is estate planning so important for families, or at least having a common understanding of estate planning? Why is that important?
Why is estate planning important? Or I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah,
not.
I asked two questions there. I'm sorry, but yes, let's start with that. Why do you think it's important for families to do estate planning or have an understanding of it?
Yeah. Estate planning is, oh boy, a gift to those you leave
Yeah.
behind. In two sections. One, well, in estate planning, we're dealing with two times in your life, three areas. The two times in your life are live and incapacitated. And then what I call legacy planning is after you die. And then the three categories are money and finance, health and body, and minor children. Um, for incapacity planning, the real gift is just making it easier for them
Hmm.
to do what they have to do to take care of you. For finances, we have the durable power of attorney. They cost minimal amount to make a durable power of attorney, but if you don't have one, and let's say you develop early onset dementia or go into a coma, and sometimes dementia comes on really quickly, all of a
Hmm.
sudden you're in guardianship or a conservatorship hearing, and it's going to cost $5,000 to $10,000 to get that established, where it could cost maybe $100 to do a power of attorney.
Wow.
Healthcare directive. I've walked through people that are healthcare agents and making those final decisions about their loved ones. And let me tell you, one thing that I've definitely learned from working with a lot of number of social workers that are in palliative care is if you write it down, like the quintessential pull the plug order,
Mhm.
when to stop doing life support. If you write it down, they can do it and they'll be fine. If you don't write it down, they may make the right choice, but that decision is going to haunt them for the next 20 years because it wasn't written down.
Hmm.
And for when you get to the testamentary planning, the will or the trust, then it's laying out what your wishes are instead of having people guess them. I'm a proponent of having a much more robust plan that is more specific about what's going on, as opposed to some of these people that write 2-page wills and call it good. And I mean, brevity is great, but you got to cover all the situations, and you got to do it clearly, and you have to do it without ambiguity. Ambiguity is the world's great invitation into litigation. So,
I'm chuckling because my father did not like to talk about um,
mhm.
his legacy and his plans. And every time we tried to talk to him, he would say, "I have a will. You guys can handle it." Well, after he passed away, we couldn't find the will. And then when we did find the will, it essentially said that my sister and I were to split everything 50-50, which I believe is also state statute if you don't have a will. Um,
Yeah,
Perhaps.
pretty much.
It's like,
Yeah,
well, it's like that didn't help us. And so
yeah.
when you mention estate planning being a gift, after my mother saw the agony that we went through going through the probate process when we mostly agreed, she
Hmm.
decided to give us the gift of setting up a trust and an estate plan and talk to us about her wishes. And wow, it is just night and day having both of those experiences.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a big point. Talking to your loved ones and those you leave behind about what your plans are. I kind of mentioned earlier that if you leave an unequal estate, then it might lead to fighting. But if you talked about to people why you did that,
Hmm.
hey, look, I loaned a lot of money to Bob, so I'm going to give him less money to Sue than Sue's getting in the estate plan, and then people are like, okay, I kind of get it, and they lets them come to terms with it outside of that emotional arena of my parent just died.
Right. Absolutely. You've given us a lot of tips. Is there a common mistake that you see families make when they are just getting started with estate planning? I know you can help them avoid these mistakes once they engage with you, but is there either a common mistake or some myths that families bring to you when they're just starting with their estate planning?
Yeah. First is not when they're starting their estate plan. The big one is not doing your estate plan.
Yeah, I thought
Um,
you might say that, but I wanted to hear you say it.
yeah. The other one is talk to a professional. Don't go to one of those online,
Yeah.
will maker 101 or whatever they are. I could make my entire living just doing probates, cleaning up online wills. So they're
Mhm.
getting better and better. And at some point they're going to be appropriate for many people, but people look at their estate and they're like, yeah, it's not that hard. I got, my wife and I, we married when we got out of college in Madison, Wisconsin, and then we moved to Minnesota and we had 3 kids and we got a 401k. Yeah, we got some Bitcoin, but we've taken care of that with beneficiaries and we bought a cabin and all that stuff. And well, we can deal with all that online. And you think, oh, well, okay, we got some property, some Bitcoin. The real issue is they were married in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a community property state, and you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
And if you go to an online portal, someone may not realize that, hey, you got to deal with the fact that you're married in a community property state. Things have to be adjusted differently. So the big unknown, you don't know what you don't know is very scary. And the big problem, it's really hard to fix it after you die.
Mhm.
Um, it's very expensive to fix it after you die. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And you hit on a really important topic, something that's important to me right now. I run a Facebook group as a community service to just help point families in the right direction. And throughout the group, we tell people, we are not here to give legal advice. We can provide you with support. We can speak from our own experience and point you in the right direction. And it amazes me how many people come in there with questions that just border on legal advice. And when we encourage them to contact an attorney or try to pair them up with an attorney, they just want this advice that is not specific to their situation, right? We were
Yeah,
um and I've seen people with catastrophic losses just trying to
yeah,
save $5,000 to $10,000, and they do,
yeah.
but then it's disastrous. So I
I
think
mean,
that
when you're starting probate, I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, no.
When you're starting probate, you even if you don't think you think it's a simple estate, buy a half hour time from an attorney, buy an hour's time. It can save you thousands of dollars and months of agony.
Yes.
They may know something you don't. I hope they would. And they may point you in the right direction. That will save you a ton of time and money.
Yeah, and they don't always realize it until after it's too late. And
Hmm.
yeah. Do you have any tips for families to prepare for estate planning? Is there any homework or assignments that you give families at the beginning of the process?
Yeah. I'll give you three here. One of them's not quite at the beginning of the process, but one is put together your family tree. It
Mm,
doesn't have to go into like third cousin twice removed or whatever, but it just really helps to, especially if it's not as simple. If there's if there's what do you call it, a
blended family.
combined marriage
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
what?
I call them blended families.
Blended families. That's the word. That's the word. Thank you. Especially if there's a blended family, make sure you know who's there, or you can tell the attorney that. Two is make sure figure out who's going to get what. But the big one is presume that anyone you're going to give a gift to is going to predecease you, die before you do. So if they die before you do, who do you want to get their share of the thing? It could be their kids, could be their spouse, it could be just cut them out of the picture and give it in equal shares to the rest of the people, could be a whole lot of things. Um, Three is, I'm going to give you a few here. Find out if anyone's on any sort of government benefits
Oh yeah.
and what they are. I won't go into all the details, but if you're giving a gift to someone, if you're giving a gift to someone that is on, say, Medicaid, you risk kicking them off of their benefits, or at least all the money you give them just basically go into the state. So you need to know how to do proper planning for that. And so there's a pretty common things that everyone would say. Know your assets. Well, yeah, you need to know your assets. But um, my favorite one is the one that avoids all the fights is the IKEA rug situation. If you've got personal heirlooms and
Mm,
stuff in any properly drafted will or trust, there's going to be what's called a tangible personal property authorization. And it authorizes you to write a list and say, I give this, this pen to Bob. And you sign date at the bottom of it, and when you die, it goes to Bob. And you can do this. It's great for jewelry, heirlooms, and art and cars. You can even give pets away in it because pets are technically tangible property. But go through your stuff and take pictures of any jewelry and art that you have, and then glue it on a piece of paper and say, this goes to Bob. That saves so much time and money in the long run. You don't need to know that when you start your estate plan, but it's something you should do as part of the process.
yes. I know one person in our family that has gone through that exercise and they write everything down and they keep it with their will. And then another part of the family where they're literally going through the process of putting dots on things that people are supposed to get or might want, and that's an interesting process. But it's
The dots are dangerous. The dots dangerous because A, it's not legally enforceable. If you just say George gets all the blue dots.
yeah, yep.
B, I had a friend that you go over to their house, their parents' house, and you look under like a vase or
Uh-huh.
something,
Yep.
and it'll be someone's name, and then someone will come by and crossed out their name and then written their name underneath it, and then crossed out that name and then written that name underneath it. So, uh, I mean, it's a system, I guess, of
Uh
last man standing, but yeah.
I'm not emotionally invested in that one, but I know the people who are, and I should suggest that to them because I bet you they haven't even, and it would be interesting to see if any of the dots have changed since they placed their original dots.
Or suddenly one of the dots just fell off, and I guess we're gonna have to give it to someone, and I'll make that decision. Oh, it's going to me. Whoops.
Oh, that is fantastic. Let's just shift back to probate real quickly. So, if people have not planned and they find themselves in probate, it could be really overwhelming. Is there, are there any tips that you think families should really think about if they find themselves in a probate situation? What would you want them to know?
Yeah, other than talk to an attorney by an hour's time.
Mm,
But here's kind of the really important thing. Probate is for probate assets only. It is
mm,
not for non-probate asset. And a probate asset is one that does not have a beneficiary on it. So life insurance has beneficiaries. You can put beneficiaries on retirement accounts. You can use a transfer on death deed or Todd or Ladybird deed to put a beneficiary on a house.
mhm.
But if it does have a beneficiary, it's not a probate asset. Don't worry about it. Focus on the probate assets. And two, a probate asset is one that is not solely or that is solely owned. So if you have a joint ownership of a house, all of a sudden when the first person dies, it's not, if it's set up properly as joint owners, it is not a probate asset. If you've got joint owners on a bank account, be careful on that one. I'm not recommending people start throwing their kids as joint owners because that can cause a lot of problems. But joint owners on bank accounts, they're not probate assets. So get a list of the assets, figure out what's got a beneficiary, what is solely owned, or not solely owned, push them aside, and then you get your bucket of probate assets, and that's what you're worried about.
Mm-hmm.
And the I just see so many times people are confusing what the probate assets and probate assets are or non-probate assets are. I've seen people come to me and say like, "Yeah, we've gone through the probate process and we're this and we're trying to understand it." And I'm like, "Why are you in the probate process? You have no
Right.
probate assets. Everything had a beneficiary. You could have been done in a week, and
Yeah.
you're 6 months, 10 months down the road now, and paid a lot of court fees and you may open a big can of worms." So that understanding is essential to what you need to do. And if you have few enough probate assets, then all of a sudden you don't have to go through probate at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
And even on the real estate side, we run into that quite a bit
mhm,
where people, they'll go on the state website, and they don't spend a lot of time, and they see the $75,000 number, and they just assume, oh, we don't have 75,000, we don't have to go through probate. But then they have real estate, and they missed it, right? Because they didn't talk to an attorney or someone who would know.
yeah.
And it's I really like your suggestion of investing, at the very least, just invest an hour to sit down and talk to an attorney. That's probably one of the best tips and one of the most valuable investments I think someone could make.
And a lot of attorneys will give you a free consultation. Generally, if they're going to give you an opinion, you're going to have to pay for it, but they'll give you a free consultation of just a case evaluation, and go from there.
Absolutely. Are there any other common probate pitfalls you would encourage families to avoid?
Um, the two that come to mind are one is don't, and this is more of an estate planning one, but don't deed your property yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
if you don't do it properly, let's say you're a married couple and you say we're gonna deed this property to ourselves, and you write out the deed and you record it, and hey, we're done, we did it right. They don't check if you did it right. They just check that you did it. And if you do it wrong, all of a sudden you might be tenants in common instead of joint owners. And what matters for that is if you're joint owners and one of you dies, it's not a probate asset because the remaining person will be owner of the entire owner of the property. But if you did it wrong, and I run into this a few times, and you deeded it as tenants in common, all of a sudden when one person dies, you got one person who owns half, and then the other half goes with their estate, which may go to that surviving spouse, but you got to go through probate to get it over there.
Right.
So by trying to save a buck and do everything yourself, you just added $5,000 to the bill in the end of the road. So that's no fun. Um, I had another one. Tips for probate. Oh, yeah, that's the biggest one. Tra Track your expenses.
Mhm.
Get an Excel spreadsheet and write every penny, who it went to, what it's for, how much it was worth, and where it came, and what account it came from. And too often we get to the end of the probate, it should be very easy, And the person says, "Yeah, I've been tracking all my expenses. Here's a shoebox of vomiting receipts, and half the receipts are there, half of them aren't." I'm like, guys, we got to track every penny from the date of death, value at the date of death, to the value at the date of distribution. We
Yeah,
cannot be off by even a penny.
yeah,
Um, you were a little lazy and it saved you some time, but now it's going to take me 5 hours to rifle through this, and I got to bill you for all that. Uh, that's not good. That's not fun for me. I don't like that. I'm not an accountant. I went to law school to avoid accounting. So
that's a
yeah,
fantastic tip. And one of the things that helped me when I was personal representative is made sure we opened up that estate account right away, and made sure that the bank we opened it offered online banking so that I had a digital
mhm.
footprint for all of those transactions. Because
Yeah.
even with the footprint in the Excel spreadsheets, still took hours, and I couldn't imagine I couldn't imagine if we didn't have that information. So,
And then you get to the people that commingle the probate assets and the non-probate assets. They're like, "Oh, there's this account. I was joint owner on it, but there's 15 grand in it, and I was told to use those for this, and we pulled some money from." Oh,
hmm
it's not pretty.
absolutely. Well, Gregory, I really appreciate your time today. Uh, Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like families out there to be thinking about when it comes to either estate planning or probate?
Plan ahead.
Uh,
Just make sure you plan ahead, and remember that an estate plan is not just your will, your trust, your healthcare directive, your power of attorney. There's a lot of ancillary documents that go along with it, but there's a lot of organization.
mhm,
Put together your list of assets, your list of debt, where your accounts are, where you bank. A big one is put together a list of your online accounts and passwords.
yeah.
Mainly your the password to get into your phone and the password to get into your email.
hmm
Because we can reset all other accounts, but we run into people all the time that they don't have that information, and then it's a scramble for to try to figure things out. And you put that together, put it in a binder, lock it up, not in a safe deposit box. Buy a $40, safe on Amazon or whatever, and stick it in there. And um, that's the way to do it. Make sure you take the holistic approach. Say, when we do it, we reverse engineer it and we say, what information do I need to make the estate administration or probate as easy as possible? And we put all that information in one spot and we make sure it's updated. So that's
Fantastic.
the estate plan you need to do.
That is fantastic. And Gregory, what is the best way for our viewers to contact you if they have questions or need help with an estate plan?
Yeah, they can send me an email or give me a call. Email is Gregory at signaturelawpllc.com, and phone number is 612-428-4002.
Great. And we will include that in the show notes. I will also include a link to your probate channel. Or your, I'm not your probate channel, but your YouTube channel where you cover some probate topics. I highly encourage people to check that out as a resource. It's out there, it's available, great information. And one more question for you. Do you work with people outside of Minnesota? So we get viewers from all across the country. I know you're here in Minnesota where I am. If you get a call from someone outside of the state, do you refer them? Do you consult with them? What do you do with those clients?
I'll refer them out. I'm only licensed in Minnesota right now. I may one of these days pick a Wisconsin license, but I'm very happy to serve in the Twin Cities and surrounding areas, and learning the law of Arkansas and Florida and Arizona does not appeal to me at this point.
Understood. Understood. Well, Gregory, thank you so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate your time, and we look forward to chatting with you again.
Well, thanks, Reen, for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem.